So what we're going to take a look at now is we're going to take a look at how we can use asynchronous requests in Redux. And one of the things that we said we couldn't do in Redux is use side effects or make asynchronous requests or anything like that. Redux is a synchronous store. And to get around the fact that we want to start making API calls inside our slices, then we're going to need to use a different part of the Redux toolkit. But just to give you a bit of background about where we come from and where we're heading to, previously, if we were just using Redux as we normally would, then at this point we would add a package called Redux Thunk. And what a thunk allows us to do, it's a wrapper for a function that returns a function. So a thunk is just a special type of function that returns a function from a function. What we are going to use from the Redux toolkit is we're going to make async requests with a function called createAsync Thunk. And this gives us the functionality that we would have had with Redux Thunks, but we have it with Redux Toolkit. And it really simplifies the process of making these asynchronous functions inside our Redux store. And the best way to learn this is to simply use examples. So let's go ahead and see what we can do to address this. And the goal of this is to take these quite large functions inside our product card and places like our product details, where we're using this repetitive code to go and get our data from the API, and we're going to move that into a more central place. So it's going to clean up our code quite a bit, and it's going to have a central place where we're taking care of this functionality. So what we'll do is we'll start off in our basket slice, and we'll also use this to handle the loading status of when things are happening. So what we'll do is we'll add another piece of state inside our basket state, and we'll have a status bit of state that's going to be a type of string. And we'll give it an initial value, and we'll set it to be idle initially. And then we'll create our async method. So the way that this works, let's create a method, and we'll say export const, and I'm going to give this method a name of addBasketItemAsync. Tells us exactly what it's going to do. And then I'm going to use the createAsync Thunk method that we get from the Redux toolkit. And let's just bring this in from Redux.js toolkit. And let's just get a description about what this is going to do. And not much information inside here. So it takes a string first of all, which is a name. This type prefix represents a name of what this function is, and this is what's going to show up in our Redux DevTools as well. Then we need a payload creator and an this is not helpful at all. So best I just demonstrate and describe what we need to think about inside here. So inside here, let's give it a go. And first of all, we're going to give it the type prefix, and in this case, we're just going to specify the first part of this, the name of our slice, basket, and I'm just going to say what the name of the function is, add basket item async. And yeah, that will do. So inside here, this is our payload creator. This function is what we're going to create. Now it needs to be an async function. And inside here is the parameters that we want to pass as an argument to our asynchronous method. So we're going to make an API request inside here, and because we're adding an item to the basket, we want to get the product ID, and we need the quantity as well. And inside here then we can add a try-catch block, and we'll get the error, and in the catch we'll just console.log any errors for the time being, and then we'll deal with the method here. Now it tells us that product ID does not exist on type void, and our createAsync Thunk needs some type parameters. Now inside here we can see that currently we're returning void, or we've got three type parameters, void, void, and an object. Now the first type parameter here represents what are we returning from this method. Now because we're adding a basket item, we're going to be returning from this method a basket. That's what we get back from our API. So we'll specify the basket type here. Now we get an error saying that property product ID does not exist on type void. And the next parameter that we need to pass is the argument types. So we've got our arguments inside an object, so we also need to match what we're doing here. And product ID is going to be a type of number. And quantity is also a number, of course. And let's see how we're doing now. And if I hover over this, then we're getting a warning still, but only because we haven't yet used the return keyword from this method, and it's telling us type void is not assignable to type basket. So what we need to do here is return our basket from this, and what we can do is we can say that we're going to return, and then we're going to use the await keyword, and notice the errors have gone away as soon as I've entered, well, effectively it would have gone as soon as I entered return. And then we're going to say agent.basket, and we're going to say add item, and then we can pass the product ID, and we can pass the quantity. Now what's really cool about these create async thunk methods is they create actions on our behalf that we can then use to do something inside our store. And what we'll need to do is we want to set this to pending as soon as we start to go and get our basket item. And we want to set it back to idle once that's fulfilled or it's been rejected, as in we get an error. And the way that we do that is inside our create slice method, as well as reducers, we can take extra reducers. So below reducers, I'll just say extra reducers. And then inside here, this is where a bit of magic happens on with the Redux toolkit, because we've used this method. There's actually stuff going on in the background that's going to create action creators from our new thunk method. And let's see how this works. Because the complexity is abstracted away from us, so the best thing to do is just make use of it, see it in action, and then we'll gain understanding from how this works by our usage of it. This toolkit's been made to make our lives easier, and it removes a lot of the boilerplate that we had before, but you're still going to see some boilerplate in what I'm about to do now. So we'll make use of builder as a parameter, and we get this from our extra reducers. And then we can use builder and we can specify add case. And our cases are either plain action type strings or an action creator generated by create action that can be used to determine the action type. But because we've used the create async thunk, that creates some action types for us. And let's take a look. So if we use the name of our method, which is add basket item async, as a parameter for this method and press period, then we see all of the different actions that are created when we use this method. Now there's three that we're interested in. There's the fulfilled action, what to do when we've received the basket back and our item has been added. What do we do when it's fulfilled? What do we do when it's pending? And what do we do when it's rejected? So let's take a look, and we'll use the pending one first of all. And inside here, we're going to get access to our state, so we'll make use of the state property, and then we've also got access to our action. So I'll use the action property as well. And then we can use this just as we did in our normal reducers. We can just use methods like this to go and set our state. So in a case of pending, what we want to do is set our status to a pending state. So I'm going to say state.status equals, and we'll just say pending add item as an example. Now I've also passed the action in as an argument, and I'm just going to console.log the action, as I want to take a look at the properties we have inside there to see what we can make use of. Just as an example, but for now this is all we'll do whilst we're pending. Now we'll add a second case and say builder and add case, and we'll say add basket item async and fulfilled. And once again we'll get the state and the action, and in this case we're going to set our basket to what comes back in the action payload. So we're going to say state.basket equals action.payload. And payload, if we hover over, is a type of basket. And that's because that's what we're returning from our create async thunk method. And it's using that type, which we specified there. So it knows what type it's going to be. And also we'll set our loading status back to idle. And then we just need a third case, and I'm just going to copy and paste this one. This is a bit boilerplatey, I agree, but it's significantly less boilerplate than we would have used in the past. So I'm just going to remove that first line. I'm going to change fulfills to rejected. And we want to set the status back to idle if it is rejected. And we don't need the action inside this method either, because we're not using any action in this one. So in the next lesson, we'll take a look at how we can use the new async method we've created, and also take a look at it inside Redux tools as well. And we'll take a look at that next.